5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
You are inside the guest studio.
Welcome to Friday night, and I'd like to welcome Don Siedenburg to my Alien Life podcast. You know, I've been following your story for quite some time now, and one of the things that struck me is how active you are. You're 84 now, or have you turned, or have you?
Yeah, I'll be 85 in January.
Yeah, and still very, very active. I know you play basketball.
Yeah, I play basketball, and I swim an hour a day at the local health club, and do walking and things. So I've stayed active my whole life.
Yeah, and that's one of the things you and I have in common. I've played basketball my whole life. I'm 55 years old and still try to get in some ball whenever I can with friends or whatever. But that's one of the reasons I decided I live there yet, but soon to retire and move to the Philippines because I love their love for basketball. They're everywhere. There's a basketball court, and if you watch TV there and if you stayed in a hotel, you might get 25 channels and 16 of them are basketball.
Right.
So. Always pick up games. It sounds like a lot of fun, and it's a good way to stay active, especially for older guys. I mean, swimming and basketball has all of those elements that you kind of need to keep things going and keep limber and keep in shape.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I started my basketball when I was probably about 9 years old. My mother used to roll up my dad's socks. He used to wear the thick wool socks in the wintertime, and she'd roll them up, and I would take them and I would use a hanger, and that would be my hoop. And I started throwing that up there, and I never quit, and I found a way to become a pure shooter.
Nice. Let's talk about your experience, and I know that you're a veteran, and thanks so much for your service. How long did you spend in the Army?
I was in the Army for 3 years.
And you started in 1954, is that correct?
Yes, I enlisted on June 1st of 1954.
Now, at that time, what was the main reason that you decided to enlist in the Army?
Well, at that time they had the selective service draft, and everyone my age after 18 would be drafted eventually. And if you waited, it generally took to maybe till you were 24, 25 years old. So my dad was a civilian employee at the local ordnance depot, and he suggested that I enlist right after high school and get it over with, and then I could start my life at around 21 rather than starting it at 25 or 26.
And in what city were you living at that time?
A town called Savannah, Illinois.
Savannah, Illinois. So which Army depot did he work?
He worked, there was, they call it Savannah Ordnance Depot. It was about 10 miles north of Savannah. And it had been a munition manufacturing facility all going back to almost to the First World War, and when in 1942, when after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, then it started up full time, and they put out a lot of bombs and bullets, and they even had their hand in the nuclear program.
And what function was your father in that facility?
He was in security.
So you decided to enlist in the Army June 1st, 1954. Did you know anybody else that was enlisting in the Army? Were there a lot of people in that you went to high school with or knew that were enlisting?
There were quite a few of my friends were enlisting, but they were going into the Navy. And I was probably the only one enlisting in the Army, and the ones that normally did go in the Army was waiting to be drafted, and they only had to spend 2 years if they were drafted, and I had to spend 3, and then if you were enlisting into the Navy, you had to spend 4 in the Marines. So that was my reasoning, more or less, getting out an extra year early.
So if you enlisted at that time, did you have better choices and better jobs, or were you still at the mercy of the Army and deciding what sort of capacity that you would be performing in the Army?
Well, you were pretty much at the mercy of the Army, and I am 5'3" and 120 pounds, so I was either going to be a cook or a clerk type, and that was probably my choices. And I had fortunately taken a typing class in high school, and so I was qualified there, and so I was sent to clerk type of school in Fort Leonardwood, Missouri.
So what was the minimum height at that time, or did they have one? I would imagine they would have one, but did you know what the minimum height would be?
It was 5'1".
5'1". Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, there was there were in my typing group there were quite a few. Well, maybe not quite a few, but people a few 5'1", and that was the minimum that they took.
Did it ever feel overwhelming at any time when you were thinking about enlisting? Because at that time there were some things going on, and we were in the Cold War, and there was a potential of great conflict.
Well, it was let's see, approximately a year, a little shorter of a year, since the Korean War had ended. It ended in, I think, July of '53, and things were pretty quiet military-wise, and it was more or less like Boy Scout camp with M1 rifles and 30 caliber machine guns, and it wasn't. I didn't see any combat or anything like that because there wasn't really anything going on.
Right. So it's June 1st, 1954, and you're enlisting in the Army. What was the procedure and the process at that time, and tell me what that was like and how that felt.
Well, you more or less, there was a recruiter at the Savannah Ordnance Depot, and you more or less went to the recruiter's office and requested information that you wanted to join up, and he would take your information and qualifications and that, and he would send you into Chicago, which Chicago was about 120 miles straight east of Savannah. And I went into Chicago to the induction center, and they would give you the physical. And if you qualified with the physical and everything, they would put you on a train and they'd send you to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. But my situation was I went into that special training, and that was down in California at Edwards Air Force Base. So I was down there for the first 3 weeks of my enlistment, and then from there I went to Fort Leonard Wood for my first 8 weeks of basic training, and my second 8 weeks at clerk type of school.
Interesting. So initially, when you were enlisting in the Army, did they actually mention that they could have a special project for somebody like you?
Well, that came about at the enlistment center in Savannah before, while I was in the enlistment process.
And what did they say? What was the conversation like?
Well, they said that they had a special program going on, and that it was. They didn't tell me at first exactly what it involved, but it had something to do with like more or less they told me food service, and the situation was taking the serum that they had acquired from the Roswell.
Did
landing.
they actually have a name for the program, or did they just say that there was a program that was food related?
It was just a program that was food related.
Did you ever find out what the name of the program was?
No, I didn't. It was just a 3-week program at Edwards, and it was the Savannah Ordnance Depot had a little airport, and they had C-47 planes, cargo planes, that would come and go and bring things in. And I boarded one of those cargo planes in Savannah, and we flew to Fort Leonard Wood.
And that's where you first initially heard about the program, or was that at Edwards?
Pardon me. We flew to Edwards from
Right.
Savannah, and then after the 3-week program was over at Edwards, then I flew to Fort Leonard Wood.
So you landed at Edwards, and were you sequestered from the rest of the base? And it was you, and was there other people involved as experimental subjects?
Well, there was three other people. There was the coordinator, and then there was he sort of was I guess you would call him a military schooling person, and those psychiatrists and different things, and they started me off with the serum that they had taken from the 1946 aircraft that landed in Roswell.
So you mentioned serum. If you were to describe this serum briefly, what exactly was it, and what was it for? Who made it? How was it made? And when did you first see it?
Well, I first saw it right away. I started the school down there on the 3rd of June. That's when we arrived at Edwards, and it was like it was very thick. I guess you could say it had no taste to it. It had no smell to it or anything like that. It was just a thick texture that I swallowed, and that was it. it curbed my appetite. I had no desire to eat, but I was very able to function with just. It was about 2 ounces of the serum each day in the morning.
So did you need to drink liquids at the time?
No, that was it.
So basically, this now you say curbed your appetite, but you had no appetite, but it also, how should I say it, provided you nutrients and liquid that you needed during a day of whatever exercises that they put you through. Correct?
Right. It fulfilled my nutritional desires for those 3 weeks.
Now, that first time that they administered this to you, was there nerves? Did they do anything to relax you and make you feel like you were part of something special and important, or was it stressful?
No, they just gave it to me. They gave me the 2 ounce portion, and it was sort of a thick texture, and it was clear, but it was thick, and I could swallow it very easily. And they gave me a spoonful of that 2 ounces every day for the 21 days.
And at that time, were you aware of anybody else that was with you that was going through the same procedure?
No, I was by myself.
So these exercise. Go ahead, Don.
There were three other people there that were handling the situation. Right.
So at any time, were you aware of anybody else on base taking the serum?
No, we were isolated.
Okay.
I didn't really see anybody else. We were enclosed in a area right next door to the hangar where we landed.
So that first day when you were administered that first dose of serum, what was that day like? Did you have, were you being monitored closely? Did you have to exercise? What was that like?
Well, they monitored us closely because they didn't know what the reaction would be from it. And there wasn't really any reaction from it other than it satisfied my hunger. And I didn't need any water or food. This came off of the saucer that landed in Roswell in 46.
So you mentioned that landed in Roswell and didn't crash in Roswell, or was it another craft that landed and there was one that crashed?
No, well, as far as I knew, this one landed, but they told, of course, this was 7 years later, 7 years after it landed, and as far as I was told that I was the only one that had to. I was the first person who was agreed to take it.
Now, was this so the spacecraft brought this serum with them, and I'm assuming that there were occupants. Any description or any knowledge of what the occupants were like?
Well, they were the humanoids with larger heads and sort of normal bodies, I guess. But what had happened when they were unloading the serum, I guess, from their spaceship, their breathing apparatus malfunctioned, and they told me that they died, and that was the situation.
Was it some kind of external breathing mechanical apparatus, or was it an apparatus that was biological?
it was a machine, I guess, that they had. Headgear and aqua lungs, I guess, things like that.
Were you treated well during this study? I mean, it was just you. They could have done anything they wanted to you, and you could have had some sort of reaction that could have been fatal and could have just disappeared. So were you confident during this time, and did things go okay and according to plan?
Well, things went real well, this was, of course, we discussed all this at the Savannah Ordnance Depot beforehand, and they had told me about the experiment, and it had been tested on lab mice, and it didn't kill them, and so I wasn't really that leery about it, and nothing happened. I mean, I didn't have any hunger or anything. I just lived on that serum for the 3 weeks.
So, to your knowledge, had any other humans had a trial of the serum prior to yourself, and if so,
not to my knowledge.
Wow. So it was all you. That's a lot of pressure on one human being, especially when you kind of know what the odds are. Even
Right.
though that they, I'm sure, reassured you as much as possible, there still had to be something in the back of your brain that would tell you that you're on some cutting edge technology here, but we don't know if it would work.
No, that's true. It was with the circumstances of my dad being around at the enlistment time and discussing the situation with the CIC representative, it was more or less they didn't give me or they gave me assurances probably that nothing would happen, but they just wanted to see what the reaction was to the serum, and they had, I guess, they had maybe tested other people on it, and they didn't come to a conclusion because there was a 7-year period between the time that the crash of the spaceship and the time that I started this process.
Any idea of how much of this material was brought with them?
Not really. I didn't know. I didn't know how much they were able to carry in the spaceship that they brought in.
So, is it your belief that this was the food product that was used by potentially aliens that traveled light years away, and they were able
Right.
to come this distance because of this small content of food that they needed?
Right. They didn't. They didn't have a lot of room in the spaceship, and that a teaspoonful of this a day was more than enough, and that's more or less what they were looking for.
I think. Go ahead, Don.
It did have a focus function and a longevity function, so it fit the bill for space travel.
So I'm guessing that it was one of the objectives of the U.S. Army to not only try this out on humans, but produce that same serum. Were they able to do that?
Well, as far as producing the serum, I'm not positive if they did or not. But if they were able to, it would have changed everyone's eating process, and so I guess maybe it didn't, because I was thinking that somebody would have probably picked it up and used it, but they had a formula, I guess, but that formula would have come from the area of the planet that it came from, and maybe they couldn't adapt it here. So yeah, I don't think it ever got out.
I think it's a commentary on what kind of creature we're dealing with, that has come such a long distance and still needs to eat, but is okay with just eating something that is tasteless and odorless. Although they may, have a different experience when they're using that product. But did you get any insight onto who they were, or where they were from, and did your handlers discuss things like that?
No, that was sort of, I guess, secret. They said they came from Planet X, and there wasn't much information on that, and they like I had explained in the that when they landed, and then they found out that the crew had died, that they wanted the spacecraft destroyed, and this was the communication between the German scientists and their counterparts, and they wanted the spaceship destroyed because they had no way to get it back to the original location where it came from. So when the army didn't destroy it, they cannibalized it, and like I explained in the book, The Day After Roswell, the Army got an awful lot of Army and Air Force got an awful lot of information from the ship.
Interesting.
The book explains the different things that they got off of it, and there was a revenge factor, supposedly, and I was under an agreement, non-disclosure agreement, that I didn't speak to anybody about this till 2016 when I turned 80.
So in the 1930s, when Germany was initiating some interplanetary discourse, Hitler wanted to win World War II, and German scientists apparently, according to you, were able to make contact with Planet X?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And what was their involvement with these aliens? What was Germany's involvement?
Well, they wanted the serum or the technology. Well, they wanted the military technology. They wanted the weapon because the Planet X wouldn't give them the weapon. They just gave them the serum because they didn't want to get involved with the military that part of it. So if they'd have gotten any weapon material from Planet X during World War II, World War II would have ended a lot differently because they had modern technology far in advance of planet Earth.
So there's a lot of different thoughts about Germany and their technology prior to World War II, and where they got that technology. And so what do you think was Germany's initial contact and when with these aliens?
Well, it would have been in the 30s sometime. And
was it the same situation that they found a landed craft and started some sort of communication with these aliens?
Well, the scientists supposedly were able to make contact with Planet X.
Gotcha.
And they were able to make an arrangement to have Planet X fly the serum to Roswell, and this was in 1946, and so that's where it started. And then once it got to Roswell, I guess they couldn't find anybody that would test it. So they finally found me.
The right guy at the right time. You just happened to be there.
The dumb guy.
Well, it had to be somebody, I mean, why not you, But it's interesting that that you did come along at the right time, and like you said, being 5'3", the jobs you probably would have had safer jobs in the Army and even during wartime because of your size. But then again, I mean, you're put in this position to test out something and that, as far as I know, there's never been anything like it. And I mean, we've tested different things and chemicals on people. The Army has over the years, but this one is extremely out of the ordinary. And so, what do you think happened to that program, and why wouldn't they pursue it if they're not still pursuing it?
Well, I think what happened was that they couldn't reproduce it, and they of course the formula that they probably got from Planet X wasn't readable by the people in the department where they were testing it, and they couldn't produce it. But they had what they could test what they got and see what the reactions were and everything else. But they couldn't reproduce it, and because if they could have, I'm sure they would have. But they found out what it could do. But it would, if they could have produced it, it would have revolutionized aging.
Yeah, and you had mentioned too that before that it had a property of longevity. And why do you think that one of the properties of that was longevity? Was it because these aliens were traveling for millions or billions of light years?
Light years, yes. Yeah, it was, and they wouldn't have been able to bring that kind of food sources. And the alien is, well, they of course they had the look of the ones that you see pictures of now, and they had, I guess they had the same digestive systems and things like that. But this was fine for people from Planet X because they could reproduce it all they wanted because they had the formula, and of course their formula probably wouldn't have matched any information that Earth had on that kind of technology. So it was just an idea that it would have been great if they could have used it. But certainly a food high in preservatives, or not. Yeah,
it could have been all preservative, and or maybe it was something that just bacteria wouldn't want to or couldn't be a part of.
Yeah, well, it had to satisfy our appetites. and it surely did that. It was for the small amount, for the 2 ounces a day. It satisfied that, and so I imagine they probably lived on it, and that was and then you could see the what it would do if you had it here. You wouldn't have farming, and you wouldn't need fertilizers, and you wouldn't need all this other stuff. You would just have it. So,
did you ever have the craving for a cheeseburger or a beer or anything like that during that 3-week trial study?
no. My appetite was just I just, like, I had eaten a full course meal and I just wasn't hungry. But I still had I didn't lose any energy or anything. My activities were just as good. And when it was over, I just went back to eating regular. And then I had it again when I had tonsillectomy problem when I was in France, where this was about a year and a half later, and they still had supply. And when you have tonsillectomy, you can't eat for it was about 3 weeks, and I lived on that for 3 weeks with no problem. But that was the end of it, and so I don't really know what the conclusion was. I just was finished out my tour, and I had my agreement the non-disclosure agreement, where I wouldn't report anything that happened, and that lasted until I was 80, and then that's when I started talking about it.
During the 3-week trial study, did you ever? Well, obviously they put you through physical training. What was that like? And was there any mental training involved? Or not mental training, but different procedures and different practices to see how your mental faculties reacted to this serum?
Well, the mental, they didn't really do anything on the mental end of it. That just sort of happened automatically. For some reason or another, but the physical part was I could do normal everyday things, exercising and weightlifting and stuff like that, and so it sort of just I could sort of tell that things were changing a little bit. My mind was getting more keener on things, because I was a terrible student in high school, and this was reacting on me, and it was just sort of was a normal thing, as though I was eating, but I wasn't eating, and I wasn't hungry, and I had activity. My activity was the same.
How about sleep? Were you able to sleep?
Yeah, you able to sleep. Yeah, able to sleep, and you had the 2 ounce serum in the morning, and then you started your day. And they kept asking me if I was hungry, and I said I wasn't. And then this went on for 3 weeks.
Did it taper off? I mean, if you had it at 8 o'clock in the morning, if you woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning, were you feeling hungry?
No, I didn't feel hungry the whole 3 weeks.
Interesting.
Other than the serum.
So you mentioned a non-disclosure agreement, and did you say that non-disclosure agreement ended when you turned 80?
Yes. Yeah. You see, actually, my dad was involved in the my entry into the Army back at the ordnance depot, and he had signed for me to go in service, and he was all part of the of knowing about what was going on, and he was under the same agreement that I was, as far as telling anybody about this stuff, and so we just were told to say nothing about it, and that's what that and that agreement sort of is non-binding. It goes on forever, but the coordinator he put a expiration date on my agreement for when I turned 80 years old. And he said, if you're still alive and you're still have your mental faculties about you, tell your story. Because he said, by that time, it'll be so long gone, you won't be bothered with it because nobody's gonna come after me. And that's what I did. And so I remembered the whole thing, and I was very. I didn't tell anyone. The only one that, of course, my dad knew about it. He and I were the only ones that knew about it. And he died. He died in let's see, it was 1973 or something like that. And the records office in St. Louis had burned down at that time, and my records had burned up. And but still, nothing was said about it until I turned 80.
You had handlers who were watching over you and administering the serum. You'd mentioned 3 different people, and I remember somebody named Buck. What was his function?
Well, he was the coordinator. He came. He was the one who came to the Savannah Wilderness Depot where I was enlisted, and he was the one who talked to me about this process, and he wanted me to be the guinea pig, and he spent the 3 weeks at Edwards with me.
Were there any higher level brass involved? Did anybody ever check in from time to time and see how this was going?
No. It was just 3 of it. It was 3 Buck and then two other people. There were other people around, but they weren't involved in what we were doing.
How about medical personnel?
Well, I had the hypnotist there, and then there was a physical fitness guy, and then Buck, and between the 3 of them, they were all sort of coordinating together and taking down the information and how I was, my situation, how I was doing, and my health and that. So it was primarily those 3 guys. Were you being filmed, or how was records being kept on that? No, there wasn't any filming. It was just I was in the morning. I'd get the 2 ounces of serum, and then they'd ask me, how I was doing and if I was hungry and this and that. 'Cause they wanted to find out what reaction I was having, and I wasn't having any physical reaction to it. I was having a mental reaction to it, like things. It was like your brain was sort of opening up to new things, like everything around you're a little more attuned to. Because I wasn't a very good student in high school. I was a good athlete, but a very poor student. And but after I was going through this process for that 3 weeks, my brain cells, they sort of opened up a little bit, and I became aware of what was going on and interested, and things all changed. Things all changed real quick in those 3 weeks. I'll bet. So in the morning when they came in with this serum, what kind of container was it in? Was it
Was it in the original container that it came in off the ship, or were you thinking it came in a bigger container?
It was like a spoonful of it, like a 2-ounce spoonful of it. It wasn't. It was frozen, or it was cooled. But that was it. And then I took it, and there was no taste to it, and it was thick, and well, it was like I said, hand sanitizer. It was that texture, and so I imagine they had it stored someplace. They must have had it refrigerated someplace.
Was it clear?
It was clear,
like water. Huh.
Like water, yeah, but thick.
Yeah.
But thick, and there wasn't any taste to it or anything, and I didn't have any hunger from it afterwards, and I didn't drink any water or anything. It was all contained, and they kept all my fluids that I excreted, and they watched me pretty closely. But when the physical reaction to it, I was able to do push-ups and sit-ups and all the stuff that went with it for the 3 weeks.
Was there any follow-up after your discharge?
No. The only time I heard from him when I went through 8 weeks of basic training at Fort Leonard Wood. Then I went through 8 weeks of clerk typist school at Fort Leonard Wood, and then I was sent to Orleans, France, right after that, and I was stationed in Orleans, France for the remainder of 2.5 years that I was in the service. And when I got sick over there with the tonsillectomy, they had sent this serum over there for 12 days. And when they took my tonsils out, of course, I couldn't eat. And then they had injected in my rear end the serum.
Wow.
And then after that, I came back to normal again, and then I never heard from anybody again.
So you actually went through this experimentation prior to basic training?
Yeah, it was
That's interesting.
3 weeks.
Yeah. Because so once you went through this trial, I mean, you were probably more ready for basic training than the average guy going into the Army at the time.
I was very health-wise. I was ready to go. Yeah, but the thing of it is when you're 5'3" and 120 pounds, you're not going to be a combat.
Sure.
You're going to be a combat member. You're going to be a cook, or you're going to be a clerk typist with my choices. So when I went through basic training, they used to have the platoon would have road cards in the back with little signs in case trucks or whatever would come up in the back and they wouldn't run into the platoon that was marching down. And so that was more or less myself and another fellow from Chicago. That was our duty. We were road guards, and we didn't get involved in the heavy combat stuff. We went to the rifle range and that, but nothing serious, because we weren't going to be combat soldiers. And so that was primarily then when I was clerk typist, and there was nothing physical to that.
So after basic training, then what was considered your job for the rest of the Army?
Well, when I got to Orleans, France, I was in an engineer supply control center, and we were sort of in between when the field unit wanted spare parts or a tractor or a scraper or what kind of machinery or whatever. We would be the coordinate. They would put their orders through my office, and then we would fill out the rest of the paperwork, send it on so that they would receive whatever equipment they wanted. And I was more or less a typist, and I was a very good typist. And I had a little typing class in the high school, but nothing serious. But I was when I ended up, I was head typist in the headquarters, and speed typist. I was pretty fast. And so there was we were at that time they had troops in France, and my outfit was in Orleans, France, which was about 60 miles south of Paris, and that was primarily it. We played a lot of basketball, and everything was fine. No combat things or anything like that.
So were you surprised when you weren't made available anymore for any more experimentation? Did you think that was going to be part of your Army career?
No, I wasn't surprised. It sort of more or less went away. I really didn't think too much about it. They came over when I had my tonsillectomy operation, and we talked then and that, and what I was the one thing that I picked up, I swim. I said, well, I still do. I swim for an hour a day here at the local health club, and that was primarily the physical part of it, and nobody explained anything to me after that. They let me off, and they knew that I had this agreement that I tell no one about this experiment, and that was sort of a given, because my dad would have been in trouble, and I'd have been in trouble, and we just didn't say anything about it, and so it just sort of went by the wayside. I didn't hear any more about it all the way through. The last I heard about it was when I had my tonsils out, tonsillectomy, and then after that it was quiet.
So why do you think they brought that to you when you had a tonsillectomy? Do you think that was like phase 2 of the experiment, or were they just trying to make you more comfortable?
They were trying to make me more comfortable. Yeah, because back then when you had a tonsillectomy, it was like it was sort of like a major tooth pull, and your tonsils are behind in your throat, and they can't put you to sleep when they do the operation, so they give you morphine. You sort of twilight sleep. You're awake, but you're then they reach down in there and clip your tonsils off, and so you can't swallow, you can't eat, and anything like that. And that's when they gave me the more of the serum, and but after that everything was fine, and I didn't say anything to anybody about it. My dad knew about it. My dad was the only one that knew about it, because he'd been part of it. He'd been part of the signing up for it at the ordnance depot.
So has there been any residual effects from taking this serum still, other than longevity and the fact that you're in very, very good shape? I mean, are you able to do other things that other people can't your age or even younger?
I still play basketball, and I swim an hour a day, and Well, I tell people, well, I don't look like I'm almost 85. I look probably 65, and I've been active in sports my whole life. I was playing senior softball and everything, and so it's you know, most 85-year-old people don't have their brains anymore because they sort of wear out. But I'm still active, and I don't know. I don't have any plans for not still going swimming every day
Oh,
for
absolutely.
an hour. And I just got to, well, this buck, the fellow in the at the school in California, he told me that to tell my story when I turned 80. He said everybody's going to be dead. That was involved there, and he said no, probably half the people aren't going to believe you, but if you can go out and the only proof you're going to have that I was going to have was what I could do physically, and mentally, and so that's always the physical part has always stayed with me because I've always been very active, and I don't, it's hard to share a story like this with people because they look at you like you're full of crap, you know. and but it's been good. I mean, I could still swim my hour a day, and I'm active and things like that. And I still have my brain. And that's what goes in old people when they're 70s. And now that when I started out telling my story. This was in 2016. I guess after I turned 80, because that's what the coordinator wanted. Buck, he said, "Tell your story, Wayne." And I went to different places, and I don't know if people believe me or not, but I can prove my physical part of it, and I can prove my mental part of it, because I learned a computer and a lot of things, and so now it's just the idea that this serum that came from Planet X is out there, and if they could have reproduced that, it would have changed everything. We wouldn't have wars anymore. We wouldn't have hunger anymore. We would have so many things. It'd be so different. And but they just didn't. They just didn't get along with this Planet X, wherever it came from, and the problems they had with their breathing devices. If their breathing devices would have worked, and they would have left their cargo off that ship and flew back to Planet X, then none of this stuff would be going on. But it would have been a lot better for mankind if you wouldn't have had the hunger and everything that's going on now. And see, this situation that's going on here, you follow that pretty close, I'm sure. With the virus, the
COVID, sure.
virus, yeah, and you see, there's no. They don't know where this came from. This is I know where it came from because it's the same kind of it's the same kind of situation that I went through, I believe, when I was 18 years old, and it hasn't been well, nobody's really claimed it as to where it came from. It's worldwide, and they say, well, it's not been good, and the wars and famines and the situations of the earth for the last 50, 60 years have been terrible. The climate changes and the water shortages and all this could all be different, but something went haywire somewhere. I mean, like 200,000 people that have died since January. Now, that's got to wake up a lot of people, and I'm sure that the well, I don't know if they know where the conclusion of this is, because it's not normal.
No,
it's just,
no, absolutely not.
It's not normal at all. And I wonder if of course I get a physical all the time, and my blood work is like my doctor said, that blood work a guy like he's 15, and I know why, but I can't tell him that because he thinks that's crazy. Life is going to be strange from here on out. With this,
it's very strange, and of course you lived through a lot of things that, of course, me being 55 has not lived through, but you lived through wars, and you've seen times in our history that looked really bleak and real scary because of a nuclear proliferation and things like that. So those were not good times, and there was a Cuban Missile Crisis, and those were hard times. So, I think, what's your interpretation of that? Do you think that this is just another bump in the road, or is this going to be something that we're going to deal with for a long time?
Well, I don't think it's a bump in the road. It's just my life. I've known why I have had the life I've had, because it's been extraordinary. I was a sports guy. That's why my grades in high school was so bad. I was a sports guy.
I blame my grades on sports too. Yeah.
but I was 5'3", and I was 120 pounds in high school, and I loved to play basketball. That was my game, and I would spend those summers all by myself at the court shooting hoops and this and that, and then when I got to my junior year, I was still 5'2" maybe or something like that. Well, too short to play, and this didn't attract me any. But I got transferred to another high school, and they didn't have much of a basketball team. So I went out for that, and I was able to excel at that. And I've done that my whole life. And then when I went through this program before I started my Army training, I didn't really realize what I had, because when you're 19, 20 years old, you feel healthy. Of course, back then I didn't smoke, I didn't drink, I never have. And so you think, well, this is just a normal thing. But then when you start, I went through this 3-week thing at Edwards Air Force Base, and I didn't feel any different at the time. But as you grow older, you don't feel any different. And I would do things at 45, and my kids would my son would bring a guy over, and we'd go out to the basketball court, and I just whip the hell out of them, and they'd be amazed, how does this old guy do this? Of course, I know that, but I didn't tell them how. I didn't, because my son didn't know him. My son didn't know anything about this. He was quiet. All my relatives and that. The only one who knew about it was my dad. And so when you get to the year 70s, I played softball when I was 70. Then it's getting down a little bit. But when you get to be 85 and you're still playing basketball and you're still doing this and doing that, they say, well, how do you do that? And I still don't really explain to people because you say, oh, half the people aren't going to believe you anyway, so why bother? But mental, that's the thing. I've learned computers in the last 10 years that I would have never, that most people wouldn't have ever started. And I'm physical, and I go swimming every day for an hour, and everything's fine. So, but it's just get to the point where if they could have harnessed the serum that I took when I was at Edwards in 1954, if they could have harnessed that, the world would be a heck of a lot better place.
I think you're right. Let me ask you one more question. In your opinion, does the government continue to have secret programs of this magnitude to one-up other nations that could potentially be interested in technology from other planets?
Well, I kind of think so, but there again, you never know. I have never run into anybody that ever went through a program like I did for that 3 weeks, because when that started, they didn't really explain to me much about what that was going to be, about longevity and having the serum to drink, and that was it, and feeling good and the whole 9 yards, and then live to be 85 years old and still shoot hoops and swim and everything like that. The club where I go to, most of the people think I'm 60 because of being able to swim in that, and basketball and the other stuff. But it's just I don't know. It's just something that could happen. It could, but when you have alcohol and cigarettes and the drugs that they have on the market now and stuff like that has screwed up the whole works. And I think this whole planet is not too long for this world.
Yeah, there's too many other chemicals that we can take by the spoonful that are much worse, and people have.
Oh, right.
It's not working out.
No, you're in Idaho.
I'm in Montana.
Montana.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm in Oregon, and California has just been ripped with wildfires and droughts and everything else, and California's about done. I mean, they don't have any way of really coming back because you've been out here in this country.
Sure, you bet.
Yeah, well, you see the forests and things like that. When they get a forest fire out here, they can't get to places other than with airplanes. And with airplanes, they can only make drops, but they have problems. They just got to let the thing burn itself out. But the situation of how long this Earth is going to be around is questionable.
That's true.
And this is like unbelievable stuff. I mean, I tell myself, I say, well, if somebody was telling you this, would you believe it? You know, but when it happens to you, you know, I say, and then when nobody believes you, you say, well, why don't you believe me? But anyway, I have like my Army experience. I got all the records and all that stuff. And you see what happened. The St. Louis Army depot has held all the Army records for years and years and years at a fire. Were you familiar with that?
Yeah, I knew there was a fire and they lost, almost everything.
It was 73.
Right.
And they don't. My original records were in that fire, mm-hmm. But I still had my DD 214 and the other things. So.
Well, I think it's a good. What you're doing right now is a good opportunity too, and because this will be on every internet. Every internet application where people can listen to podcasts. So this is a real solid record of the events that shaped your life and shaped your military career. So this will always be there, and people will always be able to listen to that. And the nice thing about it is what people do is they share it on Facebook, and it just gets shared all over the world. And this podcast is heard in 114 countries, so people will hear it. Well, you kind of flew below the radar because I think it's interesting. There's not much out there about you, and the reason is because you only started talking about this 4 years ago.
Yeah, I had to be quiet about this. It was specifically told me to say absolutely nothing about it, and I did. I mean, I wasn't going to get any problems with the Army. And
well, I think Philip Mantle is a good person to get a hold of if you ever want to, consider doing a book on it, because he's all over that. And he does. That's what he does. He does books about people with extraordinary stories and extraordinary circumstances. So,
you said his name is Mantle.
Yeah, Philip Mantle.
And
he's in the UK. I'll send him an email, Don. And,
okay. Well, I've been.
He'll listen to this story.
He knows about my connection with Philip
Kinsella. Yeah. Philip and his brother write books too.
Right. I think that Mantle is their publisher.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're all authors, but they publish too. And I think Mantle published the Kinsella brothers books. An amazing night, an amazing story, and I thank you so much, Don, for joining me, and I'd love it if you could keep in touch. I'd love to hear more sometime in the future. And we'll communicate from time to time and keep up on how you're doing, and I'll send this podcast link to Philip Mantle, and I'm sure he'd like to hear your story, and he listens to me from time to time. So, Don Siedenburg, thank you so much for joining me.
Okay, well, thank you very much.